The Dragonback series by Timothy Zahn. Book 2, Dragon and Soldier. Chapter 19.
A quiet alarm bell began jingling in the back of Jack's brain. He tried the access code again. Still nothing. There were 3 other codes they'd been taught. He tried each of them in turn, typing slowly and carefully to make sure he wasn't making any mistakes. None of the codes did anything at all. The soldiers gathered by the door were beginning to mutter among themselves. Feeling sweat gathering on his forehead, Jack moved over one seat to the next computer in line and tried again. He tried everything again. Still nothing worked. Lieutenant Cueball had started out standing behind Jack, looking over his shoulder. Now he was crowding so closely against him that Jack could feel him breathing. "What's the matter, Bright Eyes?" he rumbled softly. 25,000 suddenly not good enough for you? "I don't know what's wrong," Jack protested. "These are the codes they taught us. They worked fine back on Carrion." "Did they now?" Lieutenant Cueball said. Swallowing hard, Jack attacked the computer one last time. He might as well have saved himself the trouble. "Let me try one more," he offered, starting to get up from his chair. A big hand landed on his shoulder and shoved him back down into his seat. "Save it," Lieutenant Cueball snarled. "You've wasted enough of my time already." The pressure on Jack's shoulders shifted to a grip under his arm, and he was hauled bodily out of the chair. "Panto, Crick, put him on ice," the lieutenant ordered, giving Jack a rough shove toward the soldiers at the door. "Number 2 storeroom. Then go get the Oriental girl. Maybe she'll be more cooperative." The number 2 storeroom was the mud hut on the far side of the other human-designed building. It was small, no bigger than the SNA's cargo hold, with a bare dirt floor. Metal shelves stacked with boxes filled most of the floor space, leaving only a few square feet open in the middle. Panto and Crick sat him down in the middle of the open area and attached his handcuffs to one of the lower shelf supports. Then they left, turning off the overhead light and closing the door behind them. Jack sighed, rubbing his eyes tiredly with his free hand. Like the prison cell they'd started out in, the storeroom had no windows, and it was pitch black. "Well," he said aloud, "here we are." "Yes," Draco murmured from his right shoulder. "Can you press up beside these boxes?" "Yeah, hang on," Jack said, getting up into as high a crouch as he could with his hand chained to the shelf that way. Turning around, he pressed his back against the row of boxes. And their two-dimensional form could all had a trick that let them see right through solid objects, though Dracos insisted on saying he was seeing over them, provided the walls were thin enough. "How's that?" There was a sliding sensation on his back as Dracos moved into position. "Anything useful in there?" he asked. The dragon shifted again, paused, shifted again, examining all the boxes within reach, probably. There was one final movement, and Jack felt the dragon's head slide back around to rest on his right shoulder. "There is nothing useful to us," he reported. "2 of the boxes contain grenades, while the third contains ammunition. There is nothing that will assist us in a quiet escape." "Might be helpful in a noisy one, though," Jack pointed out. "We do not wish a noisy escape, Jack," Draco said. "Personally, I don't care what flavor escape we get," Jack grumbled. "You got any ideas?" "Perhaps," Draco said. A bit of weight came onto Jack's wrist near the handcuff. "Tell me, what did you do to the computers?" Jack shook his head. "Not a thing. The codes just didn't work." "How can that be?" "Only 2 possibilities I can think of," Jack said. "Either some idiot got the computers mixed up, or else someone went in and changed all the codes." Dracos was silent a moment. "Let us follow the chain of reason," he suggested. "Your squad used the computers on the voyage to this world." "Right," Jack said. "And they were fine during the whole trip." "They were then transported across the town of Merseb to the headquarters building," Dracos went on.
From there, they were loaded aboard the Lynx and brought to the outpost at Kilo 7.
So if they were switched, it had to have been done in Merseb, Jack concluded. And if they were reprogrammed, he trailed off.
You have a thought?
Dracos prompted. I was just thinking, Jack said slowly. During the trip to Kilo 7, they were stacked back in the storage compartment with the rest of the baggage. Anyone could have gone back there and fiddled with them.
How difficult would it be to alter the codes?
I don't know, Jack said. Uncle Virgil always handled any code switching we had to do. But I suppose if you'd set up a program card in advance, it could be done pretty quickly. He tried to reach up to scratch his cheek. The hand came up short as it reached the end of the handcuff chain. In fact, I'll bet it could even be done on at Kilo 7 while the rest of the squad was getting things set up, he added, examining the restraints with his fingertips. The lock pressed up against the underside of his wrist felt like a standard mechanical handcuff lock. With a proper lockpick, he should be able to open it. Trouble was, he didn't have a proper lockpick with him. Still, maybe he could find something on the floor, a sliver of metal or something else that he could bend into the proper shape. With his free hand, he began feeling carefully around the packed dirt beneath the shelves.
Allison Cana,
Draco said suddenly. Jack's fingers paused in their search. What about her?
She was moving around aboard the Lynx,
the dragon reminded him.
She came and spoke with you, in fact.
Yes, I remember, Jack said, frowning. He'd assumed at the time that she'd just noticed him talking with Sergeant Grisco and decided to be nosy. But what if that wasn't all of it? What if she'd been back fiddling with the squad's computers? She would have had a clear view of his chat with Grisco from there. Do you remember if she was in her seat when I was talking to Grisco?
I was not able to see in that direction,
Draco said.
At all other times, I was watching through the window.
And Jack himself was taking a snooze. The rest of Tango 5 Zulu could have thrown a dance party back there for all he knew. But why would she sabotage the computers? He asked.
Why would anyone do so?
Dracos countered. Jack shrugged. You got me.
I do not know either,
Draco said.
However, we suspect that Allison has had previous military training. Her own statement is that she was once with a different group. I do not believe she ever stated which one.
Jack blinked in the darkness. Are you suggesting she's a spy for the Shamshir?
I do not suggest anything in particular,
Draco said.
This situation is not like any I am familiar with.
Yeah, I don't suppose it is, Jack conceded. These aren't your kind of soldiers, are they?
No, they are not,
Draco said, and Jack could hear the contempt in his voice.
These are little more than thieves in uniforms.
Jack grimaced. In uniforms and with high-powered rifles.
The weapons do not matter,
Draco said.
What matters is that they are not true soldiers. I do not believe they will think as warriors do. That gives us an advantage.
Right. Offhand, Jack couldn't think of any advantages they had at this particular moment, but he wasn't going to argue the point. For a couple of minutes, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the whistling of the wind against the hardened mud swirls on the outside of their hut, and an odd sort of scratching noise Jack couldn't identify. What are the Shantine like? He asked suddenly.
What do you mean?
Dracos asked.
Are you asking about their physical form?
No, I saw some of their bodies aboard the Haven Seeker, Jack said, shivering at the memory of that trek through debris and death. I mean, what are they like as a people? Their personalities, cultures, that sort of thing. Are they like you, or are they more like humans? Draco seemed to gather his thoughts.
I do not yet know your people very well,
he said slowly.
You will therefore need to make your own comparisons. The Shantine in general are not violent or aggressive beings. Few indeed are the true warriors born to them, though those few are strongly gifted in their art. Still, even the average Shantine is capable of fighting in his own defense when it becomes necessary to do so.
But only as a last resort?
Mostly.
Dracos agreed.
The majority of them prefer to contemplate and appreciate the various forms of their arts, or to create beautiful and useful things with their hands, or to work the soil and bring forth food.
Sounds like something you'd find on one of the Orion Arms' more backwater worlds, Jack commented.
I am sure some of your people would consider them primitive and naive,
Draco said a little stiffly.
Others would recognize their strength of character and purpose as signs of highly advanced beings. Until the Valaga began their war against us, their greatest heroes were those who throughout history had stood for what was right, amid opposition, even to the point of death.
He moved restively against Jack's skin.
Now, sadly, their warriors have become the most esteemed among them. I can only hope they will be able to regain the culture and dignity of their race once they are safely here.
I suppose when they are that you'll... Jack broke off, suddenly embarrassed at what he'd been about to ask. But Dracos had caught it anyway.
Do you ask if I will be returning to one of them if we should succeed in our task?
Don't get me wrong, Jack said quickly. Too quickly, probably. Uncle Virgil had always said that he talked too fast when he was nervous. I mean, this arrangement is only supposed to be until they get here, and that's fine with me.
I will not leave until you wish for me to do so,
Draco said quietly.
I promise you that.
Yeah, Jack said tartly, blinking back sudden moisture in his eyes. But no one's exactly sent you an engraved invitation to the royal banquet either. Uncle Virgil and I were doing fine before you showed up, and we'll do fine after you leave. He leaned back stiffly, wincing as his head bumped against the cold metal of the shelves behind him. Assuming we ever get out of here. He got himself back on track, wishing he'd never brought up the subject of Dracos' future in the first place. The dragon was a temporary associate, nothing more. What does a good poet warrior do in a situation like this?
He does his duty, of course,
Draco said.
The duty of all prisoners of war is to escape.
Jack sighed. One small problem with that, he said. He snapped his wrist out again to rattle the handcuff chain in reminder. Only this time the chain didn't rattle. At his first tug, it clinked once, and with a soft thud, the chain snapped off at the cuff around his wrist and dropped into a heap on the dirt floor. Jack jerked in surprise, grabbing reflexively at the handcuff around his wrist, or rather, the ordinary bracelet the cuff had suddenly become. What in... He broke off, his mouth snapping firmly closed. Of course. The dragon's claws. The claws that he'd once seen scratch a Kada letter into the end of a metal cylinder. Only this time the dragon hadn't just scratched. This time, so quietly and stealthily that Jack hadn't even noticed, Dracos had cut his way straight through the handcuff chain.
You were saying there was a problem,
Draco said blandly. Jack glared down at his chest in the darkness. It was impossible to tell, but he could swear the other was laughing at him. Funny dragon, he growled. Okay, you're so smart. Now what?
As I said, our duty is to escape,
Draco said. Sliding up along Jack's skin to his neck, he popped the control collar free.
But our duty is also to our comrades. We must assist in their release.
Hold on a second, Jack warned, shivering with relief as he dropped the collar onto the floor and pushed it as far away from him as he could. If you're suggesting we take on Lieutenant Q-Ball and his troops all by ourselves, you've got a serious argument coming.
I do not suggest that at all,
Dracos assured him.
Our chances for success will be much higher if we leave this place and summon help.
Now you're talking, Jack said, pushing himself to his feet and brushing the dirt off his hands. Any idea how we managed that without someone objecting?
We begin by opening the door,
Draco said.
Quietly, of course.
Thanks, Jack said dryly, finding the door handle and easing it open a crack. When it came to sneaking, at least the noble Kadar warrior and the lowly human thief were thinking alike. Everything seemed quiet outside. Jack stood without moving for a moment, listening to the sounds of the night and watching all the shadows he could see from his angle. Most of the faint background noise seemed to be coming from the agrest huts in the distance behind them, with nothing closer. Nothing moved either, at least nothing that he could see. Looks clear, he murmured. We going for the flying turtles?
Would you rather walk?
Jack rolled his eyes. Draco's was in rare form tonight. Very pleased with himself over the handcuffs, no doubt. No, let's travel in style, shall we? He said. You want to watch our backs? A weight formed on his shoulders in response, his jacket pulling tight against his throat as Dracos' head rose up from his shoulder, facing backwards.
Ready!
Okay. Bracing himself, Jack pulled the door all the way open and stepped into the doorway. He paused there for a moment, watching and listening some more. Still nothing. Closing the door behind him, he slipped out into the night.